wanted to talk about today staging. And staging is one of those things that you can spend a lot of money on it or you can spend a little amount of money on it, and it makes a huge difference. It's not really about making sure that you are making your house look nice. This is about selling your property, because if it doesn't help sell your property, there's really no reason to do it. And so I'm going to go through some tips and tricks on how to make that happen. And we're going to be live here until I get that done. If anybody pops on and you happen to see me on Facebook, I want you to come to the YouTube channel and check me out. It's at youtube.com/Saul Carter. And it's Sold by Saul is the channel. And you can ask me questions. And at the end, I'm going to go through and check out whatever questions I might have and answer those questions. All right, so let's get into it. It's going to be the beginning here, and what we're going to cover tonight is why staging works and the psychology and the data behind it. Number two, we're going to cover the real numbers, like so what prices, the sales price, the time on market, and the cost of doing this all together. And we're going to talk about how to do it DIY and paying for it professionally. And then we're going to go through specifically on each room and a different playbook for each one to make sure that we're actually getting some traction and doing the right thing without wasting a whole bunch of money. And so I like to do that because the last thing I want to see people do is throw money away. Oh, that's going to help. That is my cat that just ran across. That is Nutmeg that just ran across and got me somewhere that I have no idea where it did. What did Nutmeg did? All right. Good times. So this one's Nutmeg right here. My wife tells me I need to show off my cats all the time in these videos, and I don't do it. But Nutmeg is one of the nicer cats that we have. He's the great equalizer, meaning he tries to keep everything nice and equal. But he's a good kid. All right. And then number 5 is the mistakes to avoid, and then also your staging checklist at the very end. So let's get into it. Let's start out with why staging works and what you need to do to make that happen, right? So what is home staging to begin with? So home staging is preparing a home so buyers see it and as ready to move in. There's no like extra work that they have to do. They're not buying a project. They're buying a home that they can move into. It's neutral, it's uncluttered, and lets the buyers kind of envision themselves in the property. And as I've stated before here, it's a marketing tool. This is not just to make sure that you look like you live a clean life. Everybody knows that when you're selling your home, you're trying to make it look the best you can. It's not, to me, it's not about an ego trip. This is about making sure you get to put more money in your pocket. So I know I recently did this. It was last year about this time that I sold my home in Northern California. And I spent a good 6 months prior walking through the property and then making fixes and changes. Some of them were actual, like fixing some dry rot and things like that. But a lot of it was staging the home as inexpensively as I can to make sure that it actually is going to sell. We did actually really well. We sold it in 3 days for $15,000 over asking price. And believe me, it was not perfect. As you noticed, I have cats. And I had 2 dogs at the time. And so it's one of those things where, you know, if you live in a house with cats and dogs, they do their thing sometimes, and it's not always that great. So, and our house reflected that if we lived in it for 15 years. But we were able to mitigate that, and that's part of what I'm going to talk about right now. So why this matters. 83% of buyers agents say that staging makes it way easier for them to actually, for their buyers to actually picture the home as their own. And the buyer's brain, we don't necessarily think about it, but the buyers think of completely empty rooms as actually smaller than the actual square footage. And it seems weird, but you know, it's just how things work. They have a hard time envisioning what can actually fit in there. So, and so that's one extreme is an empty room. And then the other extreme is a cluttered area that just reads as if nothing's going to fit. You know, there's not enough storage anywhere. The other thing is really obvious ones, like you want to pull down most of your personal photos. And part of that is not just you know, making sure everything looks less cluttered, but in today's world, man, they can snap a picture of you and basically have AI look you up and get your whole life story and maybe even find out why you're selling and maybe use that as leverage against you. You just never know in this world. So I always like to make sure that we are not running into that situation. And the last one is you want to stage rooms before the photographer comes in, because you want those pictures that are online, which is obviously the first impression you get as a buyer, is those pictures that your realtor puts on the MLS. And if they look crappy, you're not going to get the traffic that comes through. So we want to make sure that those pictures look as clean and perfect as possible. All right, the numbers behind staging. You actually get a 5 to 15% sales price hike when you stage your home. You get 51% less time on market on average. So what does that mean? So that means you're going to have, if your area has like a 50 or 60 day, you know, on the market time, you're going to be looking at literally cutting that in half, which is 30 days, which if you have the choice, you're going to love to do that way sooner than you would doing the opposite, right? Then what is the actual cost? The actual cost is approximately, you know, $1,500 to $1,800. What's really cool about that number, if you spend it professionally and you do a good job in having the right person come in, you could actually multiply that investment 3 times in the next and get your payment back on that in less than 30 days, right? Or somewhere around that, you know, 25, 30 day mark. Which is pretty cool. There's not a lot of things you can do and go throw $1,500 at and get 45 back, you know, almost instantly, right? And so the biggest one is staging homes sell faster. And I talked about the couple different things, which is the staged listings look better online. They let the buyer have an emotional connection to the property, and then there's fewer price drops because you're selling the property that much faster. And it also is a situation where people see homes that are taken care of and they feel like everything is taken care of because it's staged well. So they stop asking more questions as time go by because they just looked at the property and thought, man, this place looks good, right? So they feel like there's no problems. So it makes it a little bit easier in the negotiations as well. What staging actually costs. Now, I talked about professional pricing, and that is around $1,500 to $1,900, well, $1,844 is a national average. But we can do this a lot cheaper, right, by ourselves. We can do DIY staging, which I'll go through all the steps to do that yourself, but the basics are kind of the declutter, rearrange, you know, borrow and buy a few key pieces if you need to like make a room look better. And we'll talk about that a little bit further. There's also virtual staging. This is a possibility, and if your house is completely vacant and wildly empty, this is a good option. I still like to pay for maybe having some actual furniture in the house because of AI is so prevalent now. They've actually made some new rules that you have to put in the corner that this is a AI staged property. And it also is very jarring to people that aren't used to that when they walk into a property and they expected to see this beautiful living room and it's just vacant, right? They wonder how much of the rest of the pictures are actually real and are reflected in the real property itself, right? So think about that when you're doing that. I'm not a huge fan. It is something that I will do on occasion, but only if there's really no other option. So you need to decide in the beginning, in the planning stages of getting all this done, which is the right approach for yourself. So if you're on a tight budget and you're willing to put a little bit of work in, you can declutter, deep clean, rearrange what you actually already own, right? Or selling it remotely, or which I've done before I've sold several properties in Southern California when I was a Northern California agent. And you don't get to be at the property in a moment's notice because I lived 5.5 hours away. So in today's world, you can actually do some of this virtually. Or if it's a high value house, if you're staging a house that's going to sell for $2 to $5 million or higher, you want to stage it and actually just spend the money. You're going to get that return even higher when it's returned. Imagine 5%, you spend $1,800, and it might be a little bit larger if it's a really large house, but if you spend, let's say, $2,000 on staging your property and you get 5% on your $2 million, 5% extra on the sales price of your $2 million home, that is going to pay huge dividends from that $2,000 investment. Totally worth it every single time. And obviously you can do anything in between all of that as well, right? So let's talk about step one. Step one is that declutter and depersonalize. This is the stuff that really almost needs to be you anyway. Even if you hire somebody, they're going to ask you to come in and do that stuff. So what are you going to do? You're going to clean the countertops, the shelves, the closets, and make them not full. You want to make them about half full, right? You're going to pack away all your collectibles, your family photos, and any other keepsakes and anything else you might think that might be desirable to stick in somebody's hands or pocket while they're viewing your home, right? So I always tell people, get your valuables in some place that nobody will see them. And then you remove excess furniture. We're going to go into this a little bit more detail in the specific rooms, but you don't want to have a room completely full. You typically want to have at least 30 inches between each piece of furniture in a room, right? And you just want to box up everything and that you don't need while the sale is going on. So that way the house looks occupied, but not stuffed, right? All right, deep clean. Now, obviously you can hire somebody to do this. We had a housekeeper that came in on a regular, and we just had her come in and do a regular thing. And then there were small repairs. We washed the windows, baseboards, and the grout. Well, we didn't have any grout in our house. Well, we did on the countertops. Our housekeeper took care of that. You want to patch up nail holes. We all have those nail holes where we've hung something up and then it's been taken down and we just kind of forgotten about it. You can patch those up. You just fix small annoying things. One of my favorite things to do is have WD-40 and just squirt, right? You love squeaky doors when you have teenagers and you want to know exactly when they come home, or if you're worried about robbers or whatever. Squeaky doors are awesome. But when you're selling a house, it just creates this extra thing that people think about, right? So if you just do a little WD-40, loosens it all up, and you're good to go. Make sure there's no dripping faucets. You don't need to replace all the faucets, especially if you can't find like the same finish on your faucets as the rest of that room. You're going to start, excuse me, you're going to start going down a rabbit hole you just don't want to go down. And so, because if you can't match it, I'd rather everything look uniform and not be in the perfect shape as opposed to being like gold and bronze and black, right? All in the same room, all right? Now, here's the one which is neutralizing the odors. Our house, when you walked in, you could smell that there was cats there. And we had, so we did not rip up all the carpet. There was one room where it was half ripped up. It was our gym. And we ended up ripping all of that out. So that room literally was just concrete because it was a slab foundation in the house. We just left it that way because we knew that we were not going to want to put in the expense for new carpets in a room that probably was going to be ripped out anyway immediately. She went. The cat. Whew. So anyway, and in the rest of the house, we really just paid for an extra deep clean on the carpet. So it got rid of all the smell, and there was actually some repair spots, and we just had them kind of stretch out the carpet and put it all together. And it didn't look perfect, but one of the things about carpet, when people are coming into a house, It can be a real deterrent if you don't take care of it up front, but I don't like making that expense because you can throw $5,000–$10,000 away because you don't want to buy the most expensive, or you buy the wrong color or whatever, and then the buyer's just going to replace it as soon as escrow closes. So I personally, if it becomes an issue, would much rather give them some sort of a repair credit or carpet credit as opposed to doing it myself. I think that is money less wasted, and you could actually use that in the negotiations later on to better your position. All right, you can hear my other cat because that's just how things are going. Whew. Mm-hmm. This one is Sookie. Yeah, she has been stuck in this room for 2 weeks. She's not very happy. And so anyway, so in the living room, you want to pull the sofa at least 12, 18 inches away from the wall. You want to make sure that there's a defined seating area, and you want to have it to where there's space away from the wall so it doesn't feel like it's as cramped, right? You want to keep the furniture scaled to the room. Now, this is where you might want to borrow or rent some furniture, because a lot of times, like I know in our house, we're going to have a couch that's way too big for showings, right? And so it will make the living room look smaller because it will have a big sectional, right? So that's a situation where you'd want to take that out and just put in some smaller stuff so it's right-sized for the living room itself. And you want to also add 1 or 2 plants that make it feel lived in and warm, but not cluttered, right? And angle all the seats toward the TV or toward the wall, to the TV wall or the fireplace or a view window, so it looks like an intentional space. The kitchen, you want to obviously clear all the countertops. Small appliances are going to go in the cabinets. Empty the sink, right, of everything, dish towels, sponges. I know I used to keep just underneath the sink was just this big mass, right? So you want to clear all of that out so when they actually look in there, it looks like there's some room. And then you want to take down, we had a refrigerator with all the magnets from all of our travels, and so we took all of those down. The nice thing about that is we still have them, right? And just to make it look lived in and not completely like sterile, you do want to put in a small plant or a bowl of fruit in the kitchen and switch it out. If it takes a little bit long and the fruit starts to look a little wonky, get that out of there, switch it out. Make sure your cabinet fronts and hardware are clean and grease-free. The grease-free part is the part that really drives people nuts, and it just looks like there's lots and lots of neglect. And so you don't want to do that. All right, in the primary bedrooms, you want to dress the bed with simple, neutral colors if you've got the sheets and pillows and all that stuff to do that. Keep it as neutral as possible because, like I said, you don't want something in there and it's the Little Mermaid in every single room and they're like, what is going on? What kind of weird habits do these people have, right? You want to clear the nightstands and have a simple lamp next to each one with maybe a clock, if that's what you have, or a little charger, because you want to make, obviously it needs to be usable if you're going to use that. I have had sellers before sleep on the couch so they didn't have to make their bed every morning while they were selling it. I don't recommend that, but that has happened to me. And half-empty closets. This means that you can't have a closet look completely packed when they open the door or put the slider on it, because it just says no room anywhere. But if it's half empty, it looks lived in, it looks used, but it is a space that is usable still. All right, and obviously you want to keep your artwork and decor nice and neutral and take down anything of value. Like if you have a painting that is worth some money, get rid of that. You do want to make sure that there's no dust squares on the wall and things like that. All right, in the bathroom, you want to get a good deep clean, and you want to make sure there's nice, clean, fresh towels. Once again, neutral color. And people obviously like candles and stuff in there, so you can do some matching touches where you can have a candle or a small plant in there so it looks like a place you'd want to be, that little miniature spa, right? You want to make sure the grouts and the mirrors are clean and spotless and streak-free, and obviously keep the lid down on the toilet, right? All right. All right, this one is outside of the house, but this is so important that it's one of those things where it's beyond the pictures on the internet. This is your first impression of your house, right? And so you want to make sure that your curb appeal is top notch. If you do it yourself and you're good at it, great. If so, you want to make sure that you have somebody come in and do a really good job of mowing and edging and weeding. Keep that yard nice and perfect. Repaint the front door. I love this one. Here you can actually go a little bit. You don't want to go super aggressive. One of the best colors to do on a house, depending on what color your house is actually just black. And I know that sounds crazy, but it looks nice and clean. But you can go a little bit crazy here. People, it's not a big deal, and it'll refresh a door without spending $1,000 to get it replaced. You want to power wash, if you can, the sidewalks in the driveway and the side of your house, so it just doesn't look dirty. And if you can, this one's super cheap, put a pot with some fresh flowers growing in there. With fresh mulch, I know this helps everything look super clean. As a realtor, personally, I just know it's the cheapest thing that people can do. So when I see it, it kind of turns me off. It feels like they just threw it out there, but it truly is the cheapest thing that you can do to make sure your flower beds and everything look nice and clean. And so if that's your best option, take advantage of it, Right. Then I do like this one, and this one's just for safety anyway. Make sure your house numbers are nice and clear. So one, people don't get lost when they're trying to find your property. And two, it's good for you because you're going to have a situation where if for any reason you actually have to call for emergency services, they're going to know where your house is, right? And then when people are coming for photos, even if it's twilight or even if it's during the day, when they're coming in for photos, you want to make sure that all the lights are on so it adds some interest into your property. All right? And that leads me right into the next one, which is indoors, let there be light. So I want every blind and curtain needs to be open and clean before pictures or before photos. And if they are dark and dingy, just by the style that they look like in the photos, do not be afraid to just take them down entirely if they look dated and just put them away somewhere and leave them down during the escrow. I would much rather have a room with tons of light coming in than have a room that looks super dark and small because it has big curtains in there. Now, I personally love blackout curtains because I want to get a good night's sleep, but that does not show very well. So we took those down when we were selling our house. All right, replace dim or mismatched bulbs. You want nice, consistent daylight, like a warm daylight tone throughout your entire house. Not too bright, not that white, harsh white color, but something that is nice, warming daylight tone and throughout the whole house. So you want to walk through your house and make sure that all the bulbs are in the right same tone and are actually working. And when people come to do your photos or even just do walkthroughs, I want you to turn all the lights on and leave them on even during the day to make sure that your house looks as bright as possible. And clean all those light fixtures and windows that, keep things nice and dull. And if you can remove the windows as one of those things that they don't even think about, that is perfect. You want it to where your dog might run into the window because it's too clean, right? You can get window services, depending on how large your house is, $200-300. I actually just do it on my own house. I don't do enough hard labor, so I think that's the best way to do it. So, all right, let's talk about furniture placement basics. They obviously need to be scaled to the room. So if it's oversized, the room feels small, and if it's undersized, the room feels half empty and sparse and like nobody lives there, right? So you want to get right-sized furniture. And this is really kind of an eye for it, right? Your realtor should be able to help you out with this. And be honest, ChatGPT or any other AI, you could post a picture in there and say, hey, this is how big my room is. How big is the right size to have my couch? Don't be afraid to do that kind of stuff. And if you're not going to do it, your realtor should. All right, leave at least 30 inches of walking room between all the different obstacles in every single room. That way it feels like people don't have to like work a maze to get through your house. It makes it feel the right amount of space. And then define zones. This goes back to where you want to create that space that is pointed toward the TV wall or a view window or the fireplace. You want to make sure that all those things work, and you want to have, where it's appropriate, the different types of spaces, right? If you have an office, make it look like an office. You'd much rather it be that than an empty room. If it's, a guest room, make it look like a guest room, not the junk room, right? So make sure that you take a few minutes to think about what those rooms are going to be, and it's much better to have a guest room or an office than it is to have just a rando junk room. So make sure you do that. All right, here's some mistakes that I really hate to see. And the big ones, this one's pretty simple, but you do not want to over personalize. I do have a friend, she's a wonderful person, and her house always makes me feel super guilty because I don't have enough pictures of my family up in my house. And I love that. But if I was going to be her realtor and tell her to sell her house, I would tell her to take all of them down. Her whole hallway, ever since she's had kids, and I remember she has had tons and tons of pictures, and it's a wonderful thing, but it's just not appropriate for selling your house. If you have too much furniture in house, get it out. And in fact, I'd much rather it be in the garage than it would be in the house. So if it's in the garage and you don't have the cash or a place to take it, like to storage, just put it in the garage. And not paying attention to lighting. That includes the light fixtures themselves, the bulbs, and making sure that the windows are cleaned and appropriately shaded, whether it's you need to take the window coverings down entirely or just peel them back and keep them all nice and open. And like the other one is people who do all the inside stuff, but they neglect the outside. The exterior of your house is the first impression before they ever get out of your house. And in today's world, people do a lot of drive-bys before they even get their realtor to come through. All right, so take a screenshot. If you want this, you can obviously email me or make a comment. But here's my weekend staging list. And it's exactly everything that we've gone over. So it's the declutter, deep clean, open the blinds, refresh the curb appeal, pack away personal photos, patch and touch up the paint, rearrange your furniture, make sure it's the right size, and do a final walkthrough yourself as if you were the buyer, right? And then going back a little bit, well, let's go on to the next one. So the quick takeaways is staging isn't about decorating, right? Staging is about selling your home for the highest price possible. And this is something you can go a long way if you just do it yourself and pay attention to it a little bit. I talked about real briefly that I sold my house. I talked about the floors. We actually vacated all the house because we were moving. We had a house in Southern California already, so we moved before we put it on the market because, and up in Northern California, in the Central Valley where we were, actually bringing in furniture, it really doesn't pay off that much. But there's a couple other things that I did. When about 6 months before I sold that property, I walked around and looked at every little thing that I would be like, hey, if I was a realtor here and I saw this, what would I tell my buyer, right? And so I went through and I found a couple places where there was some dry rot, and I just took the time myself to actually fix that myself, and then it was never even came up. In fact, the buyers paid us more money and they didn't ask for any repairs whatsoever. And so it just really worked out well. All right, so Remember that staged homes sell faster, they sell for more money than unstaged home, and make your staging investment to your home budget and market an intentional thing that you're doing, right? You're not just gonna like, well, we're gonna just do the living room only or whatever. And you wanna make sure that you're not overspending money. The last thing you wanna do is do a whole bunch of repairs, or hey, you think, oh man, this bathroom is super outdated. Let's just remodel this real quick. It'll only be a couple $1,000s. Those things and things like those pay 30 to 60 cents on the dollar that you spend. That is not a good way to get equity out of your home, right? All right, thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna check my notifications here if anybody has any questions. If you have questions on this later, meaning that you are interested in any of the things that I've talked about, be sure to write them here, and we can actually answer those questions for you, right? And if you want a copy of this little slide deck, please email me. You can get me at saul@saulcarter.com, and I will talk to you soon. Doesn't look like there's any questions. I'm going to be doing these lives on a periodic basis, so be sure to tune in. And they're mostly going to be on topics that help sellers sell their home and answer those simple questions. So just wanted to let you know, and I will talk to you soon. I appreciate your time. Talk to you later.